Hey everyone. My name is Michael Fangman. I am a senior product designer for the Security Platform Management Group. Over the past few months, the section design team has been working on developing experience vision designs for our respective areas, with the goal of defining a design vision for what our product area might look like 2 years from now. Today I'm going to share with you some in-progress work that I've been doing around building a design vision for security onboarding and configuration. And so there are three concepts that I explored during this design exercise. They're all rooted in sort of the same high-level core problem, and then each of them have their own sort of unique smaller problems that we're trying to address with each of them too. So the ultimately the core problem that we're trying to address here is that security teams and engineers struggle to effectively establish, scale, and maintain security configurations across GitLab. And this really makes it difficult for them to understand and improve their organizational security posture. So with that, I'll dig into each of the three concepts. So the first concept is what I'm sort of calling the security posture widget. And so the specific problem that we're trying to address with this is that teams struggle to understand their security posture of a group or a project and identify any sort of opportunities for improvement there. Really, what it comes down to is there's a big lack of visibility and no clear entry points into security workflows from many of the core pages that we see across GitLab. So with this concept, what we're trying to do is to introduce the concept of a security posture widget as a unified entry point into security workflows. So the concept here is to place this widget potentially in some high traffic areas, such as on group, project, or eventually organizational landing pages. Maybe also user homepages for users that have the upcoming security manager role. And then potentially thinking about how this might be integrated into security dashboards, into the security inventory, or other similar pages. But really, the general idea behind this is to just display the security posture of a given scope, so of a group, of a subgroup, of a project, and to provide contextual recommendations or actions based on a scope security posture. And overall, we want this widget to be relatively lightweight and to give more visibility into security features without sort of dominating the page or sort of taking up sort of too much of a footprint there. So with that, I'll go ahead and dig into the prototype and show what that looks like here. So what we're looking at is the group level landing page. And so across the top, you'll see a little bit of refinement on what it looks like today. So on the left-hand side, we have some high-level statistics around sort of group performance. So your traditional merge requests are created, issues created, and so on. And then on the right-hand side, we have this potential security posture widget, which is just showing some high-level statistics of the security status of that scope. So what we see here is the average risk score, and that's sort of aggregated for all projects within that given scope, showing the total number of open vulnerabilities within that scope, potentially showing tool coverage and policy coverage as a percentage within this group. And so really it's just to give sort of a high level overview of the security posture. And then below all of those statistics, we have sort of a general action area. And this, as I'd mentioned, could be a contextual action that we could sort of tailor based on the current security posture of the given scope. So say if the group didn't have many security tools configured, we may send users down a path to configure additional security tools. If they say had a number of security tools enabled, but they weren't using security policies, we may send them down a path to configure additional security policies for that scope. Or maybe they have both of those things in place and they have a large number of vulnerabilities. So perhaps we could send them down the vulnerability report to start reviewing and triaging vulnerabilities. So that's an example of what this looks like at a group level. I also have an example of what this might look like for an individual project as well. So very similar look and feel, but different positionings. We have a sidebar on the project level. So same sort of high level statistics, but then giving users an opportunity to dig into some of these to see specifically like what severity of vulnerabilities are within this project, specifically what tools are enabled or not enabled, and then same for policies. And again, having these contextual actions to send users down sort of the right workflows depending on their security posture. And so overall, this concept, we haven't done any sort of specific research on it yet. So next steps would be to conduct research to sort of validate this concept as a whole and inform potential refinements to it. And then based on those research findings, to start discussions and seek feedback from other cross-functional counterparts to think about the viability of this idea and sort of the best position and placement for it. So then the next concept I explored is what I'm calling sort of a 0 to 1 security configuration wizard. And so there's actually a number of problems that we're trying to solve or address with this. The first of which is that we see a lot of teams often don't know what security tools to enable or how to configure them effectively for the first time they're setting things up. Getting scanners up and running and configured generally takes quite a long time in GitLab. Teams really experience slow time to value when it comes to enabling their security scanners. Traditionally, we see like the configuration process taking hours or days in GitLab, as where some point solutions and other competitors, they can get scans up and running in minutes. So there's a big gap there that we're hoping to address with this. Another big problem is that configuring and maintaining these security tools can be quite complex and error-prone in GitLab, and that applying consistent security configuration across many projects is difficult and time-consuming. So this concept, essentially we're creating the idea is to create a guided configuration wizard for fast 0 to 1 setup. We want to guide users through the initial configuration process of security tools, provide declarative recommendations for baseline protection and compliance as much as possible, and then potentially explore AI-assisted setup and how that might simplify the decision-making process. So digging into what that looks like in the prototype here, let me get to the right spot. So coming into the configuration wizard, the first thing we wanted to do is sort of get a sense of the user's goal when they're setting up security tools. So I've basically created four potential goals here. Maybe there's a bit more research to do to define whether these are the right goals for our users. But what I have here is first of which is applying default recommendations, which would sort of be a really quick setup process where we're essentially choosing the tools and the configuration for our users, and just basically they would choose their scope. And it's a really quick way to get security just baselines up and established. Next goal would be sort of align with the compliance framework. So this would be really good for teams that are preparing for like audits or working in regulated environments. Another goal would be essentially establishing baseline security scans. So maybe running just point-in-time security scans on a selected project scope to get a sense of sort of their current risk factor before they go through the full configuration and integration process of these security tools. And then the last process would be sort of a manual configuration process where it's sort of a do-it-yourself, but working through it step-by-step process. So I'll give an example of just a couple of what these look like. So if we went down the apply recommended defaults path here, the next step would be to define the project scope that you want to apply these configurations to. So there's two options here that users could choose from. First of which is just manually selecting the projects themselves. So they could come through and pick and choose individual projects, search and filter to choose specific ones if they wanted to. And then alternatively, they could also maybe define selection rules. So this would be sort of a more scalable, future-proof way of defining configurations for groups. So that way, when you're creating new projects for groups, we're automatically having sort of security configurations applied by default. So it's more of a secure by default sort of approach. And so the rule builder here that I have in this prototype could use a bit of refinement. It's pretty basic right now, but the general idea is you could define specific rules, and then any projects matching that criteria would then use the configurations that you choose. So in this example, we could say like choose project or security attribute is say business impact and mission critical, and say we also wanted to make sure that it's only projects within the research and development group. And then we can get a preview of all the projects that match that. We could create additional rules if you wanted to. So let's say we wanted to do all confidential projects across the board. Now we can see there are 4 projects within that scope. And then since we did the sort of apply recommended defaults workflow here, we're automatically choosing the specific tools that we would enable, the profiles or configurations that apply to those tools. And then users could quickly come in and review that, make changes if they wanted to. So if they wanted to choose a different security or configuration profile, or go in and make individual adjustments to individual projects, they could definitely do that. And then once they're happy with their configuration, they could go ahead and apply it. And that would then establish those configurations for that project. And so this concept we did run through rapid validation. Our awesome security researcher, Nikki, ran through this entire process and got some really great insights for us. Some that stood out for me. So things that were working really well in this concept is that the guided workflows reduce the learning curve. Users could get scanners operational quickly without having to refer to documentation or anything like that. Navigation and next steps are really clear, so participants generally demonstrated correct understanding throughout the entire workflow. Reported never really feeling lost and found the correct path forward pretty obvious. And the last thing that was working well is that the profile-based approach balanced speed and flexibility, so establishing fast initial setup while preserving the option for customization later on. You just really found that valuable. And then some opportunities for improvement here is there's an opportunity to integrate scanner configuration with policy setup, so guiding users towards more of a comprehensive security configuration and not just enabling tools. There's an opportunity to reduce sort of the text density of this configuration wizard. So looking for opportunities to simplify the language and improve sort of scannability across the board. There's definitely an appetite and an opportunity to explore more AI-assisted configuration. So all users really expressed an interest in having AI help recommend and tailor configurations for them. And then the last opportunity is to support third-party tool integrations. So considering how external security tools fit into this workflow. So next steps for this concept is to continue refinement on this guided setup as a whole. So thinking about how we support scalable organizational-wide consideration, integrating declarative recommendations, and then just overall reducing steps and cognitive load of the entire configuration process. And then once we've done that, to align on, test, and validate these concepts through additional research. And then the third concept, and if I'm running over time, feel free to interject, Jackie. But the third concept hopefully should be pretty quick here. And so that concept is what we're calling sort of scan configuration governance. And there's two main problems that we're trying to address with this. So first of which is that security configuration is fragmented across multiple locations and organizational levels in GitLab today. So we have YAML files, we have policies, we have a UI, and then we have group level configuration and project level configuration. And all of that adds up to the reality that there's really no centralized view of configuration status or health for a given scope, which makes it difficult to identify overlapping configuration or conflicts. And there's limited visibility into how configurations cascade throughout the hierarchy. And then the other problem is that managing security configuration at scale is difficult and time consuming. So maintaining consistent rule set and exclusions across many projects requires repetitive manual work, which can be painstaking for our users. So this concept, really what we're trying to explore here is creating a centralized area for configuration management with clear inheritance displayed throughout. So really what that adds up to is creating unified visibility into configuration status across different organizational scopes. So across organizations, groups, subgroups, projects, and so on. Creating shared configuration profiles that can be applied across multiple projects. Thinking about group level default profiles and possible rule-based application of those. So we have sort of a secure by default approach. And then considering project level overrides when needed and providing visibility into those from higher levels. So you can understand sort of the entire security configuration and how things are deviating and so on. So what that concept looks like, so this is definitely still a work in progress, but what we're seeing here is a group level security configuration page showing scanner status and configuration health. And so this would be sort of a net new page that we don't have today. And so across the top of this, we can see some high level statistics, just trying to give a pulse in a sense of what the security configuration status and health is for that entire group. So there's still some research to refine specifically what statistics are most valuable here. But in this example, we have showing project level coverage, average configuration health, potentially highlighting projects with configuration issues or project with stale scans. So giving some insights into those and providing actionable next steps for each of these. And then below these high-level statistics, having specific tool-based information so users can see what tools are enabled for that group and having some sort of stats and understanding of those from here. So there's still some work to do to refine these columns. There's some sort of old artifacts from old versions of this that I need to work through here. But the idea is to just sort of give users a pulse of how that tool is configured for this group, and then allow them to dig into a detail page for those specific tools to get a better understanding of how that tool is configured and to sort of have visibility into how it's configured for each project in the group. So much like the main configuration page, we have high-level statistics specific to this scanner. So in this case, for secret detection, you can see coverage, scan success rate, configuration quality, and then potentially an opportunity for another statistic here. This is sort of a placeholder for now. And then below that, showing sort of how this tool is configured for the group. So in this case, we have some configuration rules. We're showing all the ones that apply to projects in this group. And you'd be able to dig into each of these to see how they're configured, make modifications, and so on. And then also having a view, like I said, to see all of the projects in this group that are impacted by this configuration. So you could see maybe what configuration profile each one is using, whether there's overrides, and maybe there's some other additional information we want to introduce here. And really, the goal is to give that complete visibility to understand sort of how these tools are configured across any given scope. And so for this concept, we did do a little bit of light research on it during our rapid validation testing. That was largely focused on the onboarding wizard, but we did touch on this a little bit. Some of the insights that we did gain from this is that the dashboard metrics and having sort of that sort of unified visibility is really helpful for teams to prioritize their improvement efforts more effectively. We saw that a lot of participants were drawn to these statistic cards across the top, looking them to sort of gauge overall status and identify next steps or actions they could take. We did also learn that this UI across the board is a little bit text heavy, so maybe there's opportunities to refine and clean that up a bit. Another interesting insight that I thought was worth looking into is somebody mentioned why scanner enforcement and override permissions are sort of separate from the configuration profiles itself. So that might be something that we explore and consider how we could better integrate that. So then for this concept, next steps would be to just continue expanding on this concept to fully flesh out the idea, refine some of these high-level statistics and actions so that they provide value and align with what users need. And then generally just test and validate these design concepts to get more feedback and ensure we're on the right path here. So I think that pretty much covers the three concepts that I was looking for. So with that, I'll open the floor for questions, comments, anything of that sort.
Uh, I think I have some comments. Maybe I
Yeah.
have the only comments. Uh, so I think it's really awesome work. The way that you've given communication and visibility to users hits on a lot of things that we're seeing in settings. So I really appreciate how you're approaching this problem. Um, for concept one, how accurate is the risk score that you're calculating?
So the risk score is actually managed and owned by the Security Insights Group. So I don't exactly know where we're at with our current sort of status on how we're showing it right now, but I know they do have a full formula and different factors that they're considering to basically add up to that risk score to calculate it. So I could definitely follow up with you to look at sort of everything that's involved in that and where the current status is. But I don't have a specific read on exactly like the accuracy of that currently.
Okay, cool. I was just wondering if that was a concept or something that we have like deep research into. It seems like it's well thought out.
Yeah, they've done quite a bit of research, and I know it's currently in development. So it is something that we'll see in the product soon.
Yeah.
And this is Becca with Security Insights. I'm gonna drop some links. We have a vulnerability research team that actually started coming up with a formula and then testing it. So I'll include some links into the breakdown of what goes into risk score. Um, where we want to go anyways. They have to add things in kind of incrementally. But the idea also is that it would be configurable by the user because every user wants to, they rely on different factors, like based on things like compliance. They may want to put more emphasis on one value than another. But I'll include some links right now if you want to look more into how we're thinking about risk score.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Becca.
I guess I also have the next point.
Awesome.
Um, it's just a comment. One of the things that we're seeing in settings is that there's difficult visibility of system status to users. It's hard for them to understand like the impact of changes, where changes come from, how different settings connect. And I think your concepts hit on a lot of these issues. So I really appreciate that, especially the way that you're visualizing enforcement and like the source of a setting or whether or not it's overrided. Um, these are things that I think we could be doing across the board in a lot of areas of our settings. I do see designers in different areas attacking this in different ways. So you have a slightly different way of approaching it than like I do, and then
Mhm.
Ilana. So I'm wondering how we can all align to make sure that we're addressing this in consistent ways
Yeah.
across the product.
Yeah, I think that's a really great comment. I know that's a large problem that we have across the entire platform. So the more we can align and make sure that we're providing that consistent experience and approaching it in the same way, the better. So yeah, just echoing your comment that I think there's an opportunity to do that. I'm not exactly sure how we'll do that yet, but we definitely should think about that and try to take some actions there.
Cool. Awesome. And then in the same vein,
Alyssa,
lack of, oh,
I
sorry.
think we can verbal. I was just gonna put a 4 minutes marker before we move on to yours. So I think we have time for your comments and then we'll.
Okay, sorry. In the same vein, lack of centralized configuration is
Mhm.
another theme that we're seeing in our settings, and I think you've also hit on that. So this project, in a way, and I think a lot of our settings projects are little microcosms of the bigger picture. So
Mhm.
I appreciate how you have tried to provide that centralization.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know with the settings sync that we have going on now, there's definitely an opportunity to discuss this more and think about sort of again how do we solve this holistically and consistently. So,
Great work, Bill.
well,
I
yeah,
hope that we
thank you.
can percolate some of these ideas.
Awesome. Appreciate all your comments and questions.